Across the country on Tuesday, the Democratic Party gained key state legislative seats, the governorships of New Jersey and Virginia, and full control of the state government of New Jersey and Washington, where they'll have wide power to advance their agenda. Good morning. I'm Ed James, and this is Black Almanac. Political analyst Dr. Lawrence Miller joins today's discussion. Welcome back.
Well, thank you very much. Glad to be here with you.
And you know, since you've been gone, they've been real devilish.
Well, that's true.
But then, when you look back at this past Tuesday, it seems people, Americans are coming together to say, this is not what we want.
Mm-hmm. That is true.
LGBT community, black community, and even in the Commonwealth of Virginia, in the rain,
yes,
the people stood. Isn't that something?
It is. It is. And what was the heart of the Confederacy? They stood in the rain for a progressive agenda.
For a progressive agenda. And even those people who the Democratic Party had felt they had lost, the college-educated white middle class, they were there too.
Yes, definitely.
I guess they found that their name was in the book too, and Trump was kicking their butts just like everyone else.
And I remember saying to you earlier about when I was in the Roanoke area of Virginia, you know, how I saw these Trump signs and what have you. But I guess after, what was it, 10 months now of having him in office, they're getting a little, wearing a little thin.
Before we really get into this, I gotta say this. If you remember during the campaign, when the president used to yell at China, they're thieves, they're no good.
Right.
But somehow when he gets face to face with a man, he comes with a whole different tune.
Exactly, exactly, and does what the man tells him to do.
Yeah.
Man told him, we're not having any press conferences, and they didn't have any press conferences, no questions.
The Secretary of State it goes right along with that same philosophy. So who's going to get the American idea out?
That's a good question. That's a very good question. You know, what happened while he was on this 12-day tour of Asia, even when he went to South Korea, he wasn't able to go to the DMZ zone because of the bad weather, even though he tried to sneak over there.
Let's talk about that for a minute. I mean, go ahead.
But I was going to say, you know, he went over there and he wasn't, you know, so bellicose as he was before. Oh, yeah. You know, he did say some things in terms of trying to get North Korea to come to the table and hope that they could make a deal. But he had some personal things to say about the leader of North Korea, and then
about his grandfather.
About his grandfather, and so that just knocked everything out of the box. And the leader of North Korea, or at least his newspaper, came back and said that he was an old maniac or something.
Yeah. Moron.
Moron. Yeah. So, you know, the ability to go ahead and make deals and come back to America with something tangible that would improve the quality of life for people here is questionable at best.
We have weather satellites, and the Navy and everything, everybody's in constant contact with that. Air Force One has all of the whistles and the bells. In Seoul, they're only 32 miles from the DMZ. Don't you know they knew what the weather was?
How I would hope so. Yeah.
I think somebody lost their nerve.
Yeah.
But who am I to say?
Yeah. Well, you got there's a good bet that was the case.
Chief Kelly, Chief of Staff, sold us a bill of goods. And I must say, I, for one, had bought it. I thought he was this common sense man
Right.
who was going to help the president calm down and be the right thing,
Yeah, act like an adult.
act like an adult. But now Kelly is showing us that he is just as mean. He went to the Secretary of Homeland Security and got mad with her because she would not throw out thousands of Hondurans who were here legally.
Yes.
Legally.
I think he showed his true colors when he got up to the podium and said what he had to say about Frederica Wilson, the congresswoman from the Miami area, and then followed that up by saying that as far as the Confederacy is concerned, that they were not able to come to some sort of compromise. That's why you had the Civil War.
Compromise that we should continue to be slaves.
Right. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, the logic that goes on in people's minds sometimes is crazy
but it also
Trump administration.
shows you what he thinks
Oh, yes.
of us.
Big time. Big time. Because he said right then and there that he would not apologize. This is with him going in front of the American people and saying that Frederica Wilson is an empty barrel, right, who cared more about herself than the two FBI agents who died and the building was being named after. Here it is, we see on television the whole ceremony in terms of her talking about the two FBI agents.
And
So-
she was honoring them.
She was honoring them. And he comes back on this Laura Ingraham television program and refuses to apologize when everybody in the world, for that matter, sees that what he said didn't, let's say he had evidence. Wouldn't you think he would show it? Wouldn't you think that he would say, in the face of the evidence that came out, these are a couple of people who were with me when this happened? But none of that is the case.
Because he was a liar.
That's the fact. That's the way the facts seem.
Well, let's talk about election night just for a moment.
Praise God.
We saw something different.
Oh, yes, we did.
First openly transgender state lawmaker elected in the Commonwealth of Virginia. He defeated the Dianco Rome, defeated the incumbent Bob Marshall,
Yes.
who had been elected 13 times over 26 years. First openly transgender person of color elected public office. Also, Andrea Jenkins won a seat on the Minneapolis City Council to represent the city's 8th Ward. She won more than 70% of the votes. She only had 25 years of government experience working for others and making them get the credit. And then over in, as you say, Frank Sinatra's hometown,
That's right. Hoboken, New Jersey.
Hoboken, New Jersey, the first Sikh mayor
Yes.
elected. He was born and raised there. And was all on the city council for 2 terms
Yes.
in Seattle, Washington. First lesbian elected in the Senate. Jerry Durkin was born in Seattle, attended law school at the University of Washington in 2009. She became the nation's first openly gay U.S. attorney after being appointed to that position by President Obama.
Yes. What got my attention? A couple of things. One, both in Virginia and New Jersey, you had an African American, Justin Fairfax, lieutenant governor, was elected lieutenant governor, and in New Jersey, you had an African-American woman, Sheila Oliver, elected as the lieutenant governor. You had an African-American woman win the mayoral race in Charlotte, North Carolina. And there are a number of others, but who I'm talking about African-American women who voted in as mayors in Georgia. And when it came down to the victory of Northam in Virginia, 90% in terms of what he owes his election to came from African-American women. African-American women, you were talking about how in the past, working behind the scenes, well, now they're stepping out front. They are no longer the ones making, I'm sure they're still making phone calls and carrying placards and whatnot in terms of working for other candidates, but now they are running for office themselves. And you got to give a shout out to the sisters from that perspective, because all too often they have sat back and been the wind underneath other people's wings, and now they are taking the bull by the horns and running themselves.
They showed up
and showed out. That's right. And I can give you another one talking about showing out. Here's one where in Atlantic City, a Republican went ahead and said to this woman that after the Women's March, are you going to be home in time for dinner?
For dinner.
To cook dinner? To cook dinner? And you know what? She beat him. Okay? She knocked him out of office.
And got home in time.
And got him for dinner. I love it.
She took what was bad and
turned it into something good. Flipped
good.
that all together. Twisted it around.
Well, now, the tax bill. You know, they are desperate, and they, meaning the Republican Party, is desperate for a major victory in this first year.
Yes.
And I want you to take us through this bill, this finance bill that no one knows.
Yes.
That they still do. There's no transparency.
None.
They do it behind closed doors. They'll tell us that this is what's going to happen and how the middle class is going to be protected.
Yes.
Then someone on this side says, oh no, what about my piece of the pie?
Yes.
And so they change that behind closed doors. Then somebody else said, hey, don't forget me.
To me, it's one of the biggest scandals in political history in terms of what's happening with the House of Representatives as it relates to this bill. Because here it is, you're telling us, right, that you're going to do tax reform when you're actually doing a tax cut. And when you're doing this tax cut, you're not telling us how you're going to pay for it. You're not telling us what has to be cut in terms of spending in order for you to be able to afford this tax cut. And with this tax cut, after you've been railing and hounding President Obama for 8 years, now when you're in control in the Senate, in the House, in the executive branch, you've told us previously that you wanted to reduce the debt. You told us it was $20 trillion and we should be doing something about that. How can we allow this man to do that? And you flip when you get into power, and now you are pushing a bill that's at $1.7 trillion over 10 years that it'll add to the debt of the United States of America. Where is the outrage about putting this on the backs of our children? Where is that? That's what I think is so hypocritical in terms of what's going on in the Congress of the United States.
You know, I just happened to think, too, your president is always selling the Trump brand wherever he is. He gets in South Korea,
Yes.
in front of whatever their house is called, to speak with the politicians. Right?
Yes.
And he took what could have been nice and said, the winner of the Open this year was a South Korean. But that's not good enough for him.
Right.
He's a South Korean, and he won it at the Trump Golf Course in New Jersey. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just amazing. It truly is. I mean, how does everything is tied back to him? When they say, that in terms of being a narcissist, if there's a definition of it in a dictionary,
You should have his picture.
Yeah.
But, well, I think someone should do that because he likes his picture on places, in other places where it shouldn't have been. Putting his picture on Time magazine.
Yes.
And he had never been on Time magazine.
Right.
And big framed copies of Time magazine in all of his properties.
Yes. It's amazing. It really is.
Where will the Democrats go from here? I think they must be very careful. What looks like a blue wave.
See, the thing to me is that in terms of when I hear people talking about the Democrats don't have an agenda, they may not have one person who's going to talk about their agenda, but they do have a number of people who have come up with various ideas, okay? One had to do with, as far as Obamacare, going to Medicare for all, all right, single payer. That's an idea. The idea of going ahead and tuition-free colleges, okay, that's another Democratic idea which was implemented in New York State, okay, under a Democratic governor. And other ideas revolving around going ahead and dealing with issues relative to, like, this tax reform or cut, looking at it more from the middle class getting tax relief than people who are part of that 1%, the upper tier or the upper income individuals of the United States. So there are a number of different things that Democrats have been talking about that they need to amplify and not just be talking about being against Donald Trump, but also what their agenda would be if they were so fortunate of the people going ahead and voting for them in 2018. And I'll give you another thing to think about as far as that is concerned. In Alabama on December 5th, there will be a Senate race, okay? And in that Senate race, Roy Moore, right?
The Honorable former Judge Roy Moore
against Douglas Jones, the Democrat. And right now they're supposedly running neck and neck in the polls, okay? That will really give you a bellwether as to, or the temperature of this issue of whether it's a tsunami as far as Democrats are concerned, or whether it is, a temporary move towards getting rid of Trump. So the thing here is that also on December 5th, you have in Atlanta another race for mayor, a runoff between a young African-American woman named Keisha Bottoms against a Republican, Norwood, and we'll see what happens in Atlanta. So there's a lot of different things that are happening up to November of 2018 that will give us an indication of where we are in this process.
Well, I think what I saw on Tuesday was many groups, black women, college-educated white women who stood in the rain in Virginia,
Yes.
LGBT community, all of these groups who traditionally voted Democrat until the Trump thing came through. Now, if the party, and they all have ideas,
Yes.
they all have good ideas, but they all want to be heard.
Yes.
And too often, the Democratic Party did as the Republican Party did. A few people at the top decided what the agenda would be,
Yes.
and everyone else was expected to go along. I think those days are over.
I believe that is absolutely true. I think that in terms of ideas coming from the bottom up is more apropos to the time that we're in now than from the top down. The thing here is that people want to see that the people we elect really care about their everyday bread and butter issues, that they are talking about affordable housing, that they're talking about daycare. You know, daycare for especially single parent households is astronomical, if not for two-parent households. The cost of a college education, a job, all those different things, bread and butter issues are things that people are concerned about and want leadership to be talking about.
Speaking of daycare for single parents, many corporations
Yes.
across the country, many, but not enough, have, especially large ones, have daycare on site
Yes.
so that you can bring your child to work.
Yes.
And if they're not feeling just so well, you get a chance while you're at work to go over to that other section and look in on them.
Exactly.
Now, to me, that's a bread and butter issue.
No question. And it's innovative thinking like that that people are looking for our leaders to come up with in dealing with their everyday problems. I mean, if you're going to talk about going ahead and meeting people where they are, you got to go to where they are. You got to understand what their issues are. And you can't do that from some ivory tower. You got to get down in there and find out what's happening as far as the issues that and the challenges that they're confronted with. And that is the only way you're going to get them. And that's what I think this election has done of these different people we're talking about. They went out there, they knocked on doors, they found out what people were interested in, and went ahead and articulated those things as to what their agenda is going to be if they were elected. And I think that is what's important to people. You know, people talk about there's a Trump Democrat. I don't believe in that at all. I don't see how you could be a Democrat
and be a Trump
and be a Trump supporter. You understand? No, these people are looking for somebody who's going to champion their cause. And because of the things you just got through saying about how these things, both in the Democratic and Republican Party, because people don't want to be ignored and they don't want to be taken for granted. They want you to solve their problems. And unless these people are able to solve their problems, they're going to look to someone who talks about going ahead and solves their problem and hope that they go ahead and do that.
You know, oftentimes when we look at elections and the turnout is not what some think it should be, they look to the black community.
Yes.
Oh, we would have won if the black community turned out. And the black community only turns out when there's a black at the top of the ticket. I think what happened in the Commonwealth of Virginia showed just the opposite of that.
Oh, no question.
When they believe that someone will care about their interests, that's when they turn out.
Yes.
And That's not difficult.
Not at all.
You know, don't tell me what you want me to vote for. Ask me what are my concerns.
Exactly. And we've
before.
And we've said this on numerous times on this show. It's about my interests. It's about not so much who's my friend and who's my enemy. It's about what are my interests and how are you going to bring those things to the forefront in terms of dealing with the everyday problems that I have. Unless you do that, of course I'm going to be less motivated to come out. I personally think people should come out no matter what to express themselves. However, I understand when people feel that they've been ignored. You know, because you could say the Democratic Party may ignore the African American community, or that the Republican Party, I'm sorry, do it the other way around. The Republican Party ignores African American issues, and the Democratic Party takes it for granted. The thing here is that if you are a voting bloc that comes out election after election after election, they have to pay attention to you because you're going to be putting people into office that speak to your issues. So my thing here is that I encourage people to vote all the time. I don't care if it's school board, whatever it is.
And the last thing before we close, we found out across this country that the LGBTQ community, that no one's afraid of them because they have a right too.
Yes, most definitely.
And
just like anybody else.
Yeah. And this election, this past Tuesday, was the first time that we saw that Asians, women, LGBTQ, and
I think it was a maturation of the electorate in that it's people caring about ideas. What are you going to do to deal with my everyday issues and challenges? And that's what I want to hear from my candidates. Unless you can make that connection, I don't want to vote for you. I want to vote for the person who does, and that's only smart to go ahead and do.
Well, Dr. Miller, you got to come back next week so we can hear more about these issues.
Well, thank you.
And as always, have a great day, Suncoast.
Credit card debt can ruin your life. If you owe $10,000 and minimum payments are siphoning away your paycheck each month, you can get debt-free in less time than you think.
I've paid $800 a month for the past 3 years and haven't changed the balance on my credit card.
Get debt-free now has a program to reduce your debt, stop the harassing phone calls, avoid financial ruin, and settle for less than you owe.
I feel like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders.
You're pre-approved for our special hardship program if you owe $10,000 or more. Upon payment of your new lower balance, your debt will finally shrink until you are debt-free.
My family no longer has 30 years of payments ahead of us at 20% interest.
There's no fees until you see results. So call now, make one monthly program payment, and free up your cash. Resolve your debt.
Call 800-628-1251, 800-628-1251.
Check out My Suncoast Dining on mysuncoast.com.